I was raised to believe the world was ending, that salvation was a countdown, that everyone I loved needed to be saved before it was too late. I'm talking about the end days as a Seventh-day Adventist. I couldn't watch The Simpsons growing up. I'd always feel guilty for eating pepperoni pizza because we couldn't have pork. I was taught that Harry Potter was witchcraft. It wasn't until college that I watched Harry Potter for the first time. Religion shaped everything for me growing up. I left the church in 2010. And in many ways, I have been rewriting my relationship to the divine ever since. But this episode today isn't necessarily about my journey with religion. It's about what happens and what the possibilities are when dogma softens. When new questions become more important than learned answers. My mom had a hard time dealing with the fact that me and my sister weren't aligning with the church as we got older, as much as when we were younger. It was like a silent grief stretching across the country and overseas. While meanwhile, my sister and I had been thriving and finding our own way. And Mom, she was still devoted, still showing up every single Sabbath. One day I just couldn't take her unhappiness anymore, and I challenged her. I said, Mom, you've given the church everything your entire life. Why don't you deserve some happiness for that devotion? And I think that was one of many conversations where something kind of clicked. And one Sabbath and many talks later, she decided to take a couple of weeks off church. A year and a half later, she hasn't been back. And in that space, something opened. She became more curious, she became more open-minded, and more grounded. She started asking questions I never thought I'd hear from her. She still believes in God, but now she's looking for some stable ground to stand on for this next chapter of her life. One day when she was visiting me, she was looking through my bookshelf and she took The Third Jesus, which is a book by Deepak Chopra. I hadn't read it yet, but I bought it because I knew I would resonate with the material. I knew that I was already arriving into this universe of thought that Deepak Chopra had presented. And when I visited my mom recently, she had questions about the book. I hadn't read it yet, so I was like, screw it, let's sit down. I bought my own new copy and I sat down with her with this book. We sat down on the kitchen table, no microphones, no plan, no agenda, just two former Seventh-day Adventists opening a book that neither of us would have touched when I was a kid. And right as we were starting, thank God, I felt inspired to record. I asked Mom if she would be cool with it, so I laid my phone on the table between us. And what began as a casual intention suddenly took a deep dive. I don't know if this is like all moms, maybe just mine, but my mom just immediately went for it. And she asked about my depression after the Peace Corps. For those of you who don't know, I was in the Peace Corps from 2015 to 2017 in Southeast Asia. And I was in the country of Timor-Leste, which was an incredible time of my life. But upon getting back, I was depressed for about a good 4 or 5 years. It took a lot out of me. And a lot of that I kind of hid from my parents. But anyways, I had finally mentioned that in one of our family therapy sessions. The first time anyone in my family had really, really heard any of the details of what I'd carried throughout that time. See, my parents divorced 15 years ago, but a couple of my siblings and I convinced them to join us in therapy. So it was the 5 of us minus one brother out of state, all together in the same room, the same therapist, awkward as hell. But our intention was like, hey, I don't know if any of y'all, but like communication within our family is kind of a nightmare. My sister's texting me, I'm calling my brother, my mom's texting us at a group chat, we're reaching out to each other. It's like, we're going in circles all the time. Why are we talking around each other? And so it's like, let's go to therapy and figure this out. And it's working. It's working so much that I was able to sit in this kitchen table with my mom and have this conversation with her without flinching. Before, when my mom would ask me those kinds of questions, I would just flinch, I would deflect, I would give a one-word answer. But I felt comfortable enough just completely opening up. So in this episode, I tell her about my depression after Peace Corps, how for so long I thought it was heartbreak and I thought it was love, and it was really just grief. I learned that sometimes we cling to a pain that feels safer. The saying that the devil you know is better than the one you don't. And that the devil I knew was heartbreak and the devil I didn't was grief. And, grief can wear any disguise of love stories, of pain, of anger, of resentment. Especially when grief has nowhere to land, it'll stick to anything. So she recognized her own version of that and the terror that comes when you finally get a moment of peace, and how you're not sure if you can trust it, and how that can be a certain hell of its own, certainly. We talk about Christ consciousness, about what it means to live with complete unconditional love. Unconditional love, not just, oh, this person agrees with me, so I'm going to love them. This person has the same values as me, so I'm going to love them. No, unconditional love. What does it mean to love someone no matter what? What does it mean to love someone who hasn't earned it? Who you think hasn't earned it, right? Everyone's earned it, at least in my eyes. But of course, you're probably disagreeing right now. So we talk about Christ consciousness, unconditional love, about grief, about anger in disguise, and about the legacy of a dresser that my grandma gave to a cousin who recently had a baby. We talk about what it means to protect peace once you finally find it and once it finally finds you. In this conversation, Jesus Christ becomes less of a savior and more of a mirror. Now, I understand if you're a devout Christian or maybe even a casual Christian, that might sound pretty wild or triggering. But if you're here, I invite you to trust that you're here for a reason. This is the first of what may become a series of conversations on the third Jesus with my mom. But really, it's about what happens when religion softens and we allow spirit to take its place. This isn't so much a podcast as it is a prayer of presence and progress that you just happen to be overhearing. The fact that my mom, almost a lifelong Seventh-day Adventist, was open enough to speak and utter the words Christ consciousness would have been unthinkable in my childhood. We would have called it blasphemy, witchcraft, the devil. We would have pitied over how lost one must be in order to think this way. So I don't know if this conversation is for everyone. It's probably not. But if you've been carrying questions of your own about grief, about God, about what softens when dogma lets go, when judgment lets go, well, maybe this is for you. Now, one final note before we dive in. I think this is important context about this work. As some of you may know, last year I completed my own year to live experience, which is you just pretend like you have 1 year left to live. And my two biggest priorities during that time were service and family. I found meaningful work in prison rehabilitation, and in between, I was turning towards my parents, trying as intentionally and gracefully and many times failing, but being very intentional about trying to heal those places where things had gotten quiet, tense, or stuck between us. A few months after my year to live ended, we started family therapy together. This conversation with my mom, the same one you're about to listen to, is one of the fruits of that labor. I hope you enjoy. Thanks for being here. Let's jump in. Okay, what's up?
I'm interested in knowing what had you so depressed after you came back from Peace.
I thought it was heartbreak. I thought I just wanted to be with someone who I couldn't be with. But it was all the grief. I didn't acknowledge all the loss that I've had during Timor. I didn't even know, but I didn't realize it was all lost until like 2020.
2 years later.
Or even no, it actually wasn't even until last year where I didn't acknowledge all the loss.
The loss of.
Oh, well, my friend had died like my first month there from camp. Theo's loss. Where the loss of Theo. And then when getting back from home, when I went back to the country, within like the first week back, my two closest friends both went back home. And they were like my rocks. So like when I needed a support system the most, they were gone. And then to finish off my first year in November, that was when Angela died.
That's right.
So it was like, those were my, it was that it was so many. And it was also that it was my first experience with loss to someone very close to me, at least. Yeah, but I blamed all of that on heartbreak. I thought it was just a girl problem. So that's why I obsessed over the girl stuff for like 2 or 3 years, because I wasn't ready to look at the grief. I was like, I'd prefer to be heartbroken rather than grieving.
Wow.
And minus all of that, it's a tough experience anyway, readjustment. They say readjustment is always hard. So even if I didn't experience like that trauma of the loss, I probably still would have been depressed in some way, because it's just the readjustment process is hard. It's hard to go somewhere and get used to a new place and a new way of life and then get thrust back into the old one. So I was dealing with readjustment. I was dealing with reverse culture shock. I missed my host family. I missed the partner I was with. I missed the person who I didn't end up with. It's like I was grieving two different women. And yeah, and then just coming back into the day-to-day life. And then with all of that grief bubbling under that I'd never acknowledged. Yeah, I was just kind of lost.
Did you ever go to counseling in college?
No. During college, no.
So you had never gone to counseling at all until after you came back?
Yes.
Or did you go to counseling at Timor?
No.
No.
No, I think I went to counseling for the first time in 2019 or 2020. And even then I went for love. I was like, can't get over this girl. Help me.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah.
Then I figure it can be very depressing to see how life is in another country. So different from us, from the U.S.
Yeah.
And then...
And then we're a country of community. There's not a lot of community here.
So what it lacks in one area is rich in another.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like here too. Community.
Yeah, we're rich in amenities, and we're rich in status, and we're rich in things, but we're poor in spirit, and in love, and in family, and in community. And unity too. We have like so many different cultures and communities here over there. It's just like you're all just Timorese. So that was pretty cool. Yeah. Everyone was the same culture.
So then, does that mean then that you feel that we didn't have the family unity.
No, we had family unity. I just meant like the widespread, like
What?
everyone lived together. Everyone was walking distance from each other. They would help. It was on another level, you know. They would help build each other's houses. If one person was pregnant, if one person's like family was pregnant and they were expecting a family, like the whole community would rally to make sure they had everything they needed. You know, we have like a baby shower here, but like over there, it's like, no, let's build your house.
Wow.
Yeah. And let's all have a big party to celebrate this new chapter you're about to be on. And for the farming, it's like when there's a harvest, it's like, let's all go up to the farm and party all day and hang out and celebrate.
That's what the family does.
Yes. And when there was a wedding, before my host brother had his wedding, they had this big feast where they invited the mother-in-law's family. They invited the wife's family, so like both families can come to a big party and meet each other. And they had a big feast. And then after the party, or during the point of the party is to celebrate and eat, but it's for everyone pays in to contribute to the wedding. And they write everything down on a ledger. This person contributed this. This person contributed this. This person did this. So that when they have a party, they match it.
They match it.
Yeah. And so in a lot of ways, it's what perpetuated poverty, because it's like no one's investing their money into anything. They're just like giving their money back. But it's also a very rich way to self-sustain a culture at the same time. Self-sustain a community. Yeah. So it's just a community showing up for everyone in every way that matters. And I think we have community here, but we don't show up for each other in ways like that.
Kind of here we do minimum things.
Surface level.
How only the family needs it. Like, you know, I gave the box spring.
Mm-hmm.
Grandma gave her dresser. And
Well, they had the party for her and the baby shower. And...
yeah. But I mean, now that she was moving, Grandma gave her the dresser. So now she's got to go shopping for one.
Oh, Grandma?
Yeah. So
That's a gift, though, because that dresser was going to be there long after Grandma is here. And she could always say Grandma gave me that dresser. She'll tell her daughter.
her son.
Her son, sorry.
Her son. And that dresser will probably become the baby's dresser when he's a teenager.
Yeah.
Because then, you know.
I think Grandma knew what she was doing. That kid's, yeah, her son's going to have that until he's old enough to put condoms in it.
Oh my God.
And let's go start all over. This came from your great grandma.
I like that. I like that. So, yeah, talking about grief. When my grandma's passed away, I really didn't feel anything.
You were close to him?
And I wasn't close to him. Well, I mean, we were in different countries. We weren't connected. We weren't connected like that. I feel like I had more connection with my dad's mother because she would come and visit. She would come and visit, but even then, I didn't feel anything until like a year after she passed away. Then it was like my mind was started to roam with that. But anyway, you know, as I was saying, I learned more about you from instant messaging.
Instagram?
Instagram. From Instagram. So I think that you kind of guided our family therapy as to, you know, what to discuss next and stuff.
You felt like I did that?
Uh-huh.
How?
You were the one that first said, we're not here, directing yourself to me and your dad. We're not here to point fingers or to blame you for anything. And that has been very comforting. Very comforting. And, again, Eric said it later at another session, but it was you who said it first.
I opened up. I set the parameters early on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was very meaningful and comforting to me because I did go in there feeling like, oh, our fingers are gonna be pointing.
I'm gonna get shit out too. I'm gonna get shit on.
Yes. And that's why I couldn't sleep the night before.
Oh, I'm sorry. It must have been terrifying.
It was scary. But then, after you said what you said, and I could see that your brother and sister were in agreement, I thought, my gosh, I have children with a lot of grace. You had a grace and a big heart that they're not going to point the finger. So that's one of the biggest things that I've gotten out of
The grace?
family therapy.
Just the grace.
The grace from all of you. But actually, I feel like you really haven't shared very much in there.
Like I have on the Peace Corps talk. And also, I don't want this to come across as like higher, but I feel like I've arrived at a lot more peace. And so I've done a lot more time and space to do work that a lot of you guys have not yet. And so I felt like it would be selfish for me to take more for me instead of allowing you guys to get a little bit more of what you needed.
But it's like, to me, I want to know about you. I want to know how I can be of support to you, what it is that I can do that you've needed and I haven't been there for. But yeah, that was the biggest thing. Of you coming out right at the beginning.
I'm glad that was helpful.
So, absolutely.
It's always good to set the stage. You want to talk about this book then?
Yeah.
Do you have your copy? I haven't read this yet.
Okay.
You're going to start with the intro. I recommend you highlight and mark down while you read.
I do.
You do? Mm-hmm. Put question marks or like WTFs.
WTS.
F. What the fuck?
I thought that's what you meant.
And what the fuck does he mean?
Like where I actually have questions.
Yes.
Is.
And next time I'll read it ahead of time.
Okay. On page 28, under prayer. Ask to see what lies behind evil. This doesn't have to be a philosophical request. What you want is a glimpse behind the disguises we all wear when we feel angry, victimized, hostile, and aggressive. These emotions are insubstantial, convincing for only a moment. I don't understand that. These emotions are insubstantial.
These emotions, what part of that don't you understand? Which emotions or what is substantial?
What is insubstantial.
Well, what are the emotions he
Anger, hostility, aggressive, those negative things.
Yeah, so
Being victimized.
what you want is a glimpse behind the disguises. Behind is the key word. Behind the disguises we all wear when we feel angry, victimized, hostile, and aggressive. These emotions are insubstantial, convincing for only a moment.
So in other words, that there's no real reason behind it.
Well, let's read the rest.
Okay.
Yet we are so intimidated by other people's emotions and so convinced by our own that we lose sight of the underlying reality. By praying to whatever deity or higher self you believe in, you are essentially making a connection with reality, asking to be reminded that illusion isn't real.
And yet, when you're going through some stuff, it's not an illusion. It's not an illusion. It's real.
Mm-hmm.
So
In the moment, yeah, it's very real. But what he's getting at with the third Jesus is the idea that that still isn't real. In the moment, it's real. We're responding to it because our consciousness is at a place that believes this is as real as it gets. This is the realest thing that there is. And so this is why I'm reacting and responding so much to it. But when he says those are disguises, and he's what I believe he's alluding to, when he says, he doesn't say it in here, but of like that we are of the underlying reality. By praying to whatever deity or higher self you believe in, you are essentially making a connection with reality, asking to be reminded that illusion isn't real. When you pray, you're reconnecting to God. You're reconnecting to the universe, to that God consciousness that they talk about. In saying that your spirit, your soul is bigger. It's saying that your soul, the soul of Leticia, is bigger than whatever the flesh of Leticia is experiencing in that moment. Like you are more than Leticia. Leticia is all you know, but your essence, your soul is way bigger than that. And that's what it's saying. So it's not necessarily to say this isn't real, it's saying to remember the essence of who you are. Does that make sense?
yeah.
I think we have to go ahead.
The rest of it just explains further
For grace.
for grace and love and faith, because I put on here, or I highlighted, pain is too physical and too present under faith.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Despite its intensity, pain is only temporary. Evil depends on our forgetting this fact. If it couldn't inflict pain, evil would have no power at all. Therefore, when caught in the throes of any pain, keep faith. And
the next is what we said. Look, realize that there is a reality beyond our present misery. You are that reality. That essence of Leticia is that reality. The Leticia behind the Leticia. And you will return to it as your suffering lessens. I think we have to, he defines evil in a previous paragraph. I think we have to look at that too first.
okay,
Go on page, let's see what he talks about as
page
evil
27.
first. Oh, here it is. Look. But the fact that Jesus is worshipped for not resisting evil hasn't carried the day for us ordinary mortals. We continue to live, by and large, by the very law he preached against, an eye for an eye, 100%. The missing element, as always, is consciousness. You cannot live by resist not evil without being in a higher state of consciousness. Fortunately, to the extent that you rise toward God consciousness, evil withdraws, leaving you invulnerable. Evil is everything when you are susceptible to it. It is nothing when you aren't. These are two poles of spiritual existence, the beginning and the end of the journey. in between our many steps, but Jesus doesn't fill them. Perhaps in real life he did, because the scant words he left to us, those his followers could remember and write down, amount to less than 2 or 3 hours if read one after the other. However, the wisdom traditions of the world can fill in the blanks for us. In Buddhism, in the ancient Vedic writings of India, and in the lives of Christian saints, we find abundant evidence that awareness can grow in the direction of God consciousness, and we see how it can do so. So this is important. Well, first, what questions do you have here? What makes sense? What doesn't?
Evil, you know, I have to bring this up. It's like the experience I had with your dad. Just when I read this, it just makes me think of that experience.
What experience? Your marriage or a specific scene?
The marriage.
Okay.
It just, to me, it was just, he was evil. He was evil. And so here, evil is everything when you are susceptible to it. It is nothing when you aren't. I could think of, I mean, there were instances when I would talk to him about what was bothering me, and it would make me feel bad for complaining. But yet it ends up being his manipulation. So how do I evil is everything when you're susceptible to it. How would I not have been susceptible to it?
We'll read the next one. These are the two poles of the spiritual existence, the beginning and the end of the journey. So being susceptible to it's the beginning of the journey. Not being susceptible to it is the end of the journey.
Oh.
In between are many steps, but Jesus doesn't fill them. So this is kind of what we were saying, how I told you about that video I watched, I think it was by Alan Watts, where he says that Christians are interesting because they hold themselves to a standard of what they believe is a God human of Jesus, right? And that's what he says here. Jesus, there's a lot in between, but Jesus doesn't tell people that. He's only telling people the words that he left to us, which is kind of at the end of the journey. Yeah. However, the wisdom traditions of the world can fill in the blanks for us. Buddhism, Vedic writings of India, Christian saints, etc. That awareness can grow in the direction of God consciousness, and we see how it can do so. So this is why, do you remember when you went on that SDA retreat in Mexico, and you said, we meditated? And I was like, awesome, what was it? And you're like, rewrote Bible verses over and over with their non-dominant hand. And that's why I was so mad. I was like, that's great for writing and mindfulness, but look, that is a Buddhism, that is an ancient practice that the church robbed from you and said, you are not going to have access to these thousands of years, however long of years, hundreds of thousands of years of ancient tradition of meditation. We are going to further indoctrinate you. And so what meditation does, that's the in-between. That's a lot of the in-between. And meditation can have many different roles. For me, it was poetry. For others, it can be running. For others, it's whatever. It's like a spiritual practice that brings you into the present. For Eric, it's probably through cooking. You know, that's what he wanted to safeguard so much. Let me cook. Let me cook. And so that just takes you along the journey, and it can help you start it. But the end of it is when you aren't susceptible to it. And I hate saying, I don't want to say that I'm at the end of the journey, but according to this passage, I am, because me not being susceptible to the evil is what makes me so good at my job. Because I can go in there and not see the evil that they all did. I see that the evil is the disguise. What he says here under prayer. Look, ask to see what lies behind evil. That's what I'm seeing. That's what I'm obsessed with. I see what's behind the evil. This doesn't have to be a philosophical request. What you want is a glimpse behind the disguises we all wear when we feel angry, victimized, hostile, and aggressive. Again, those are the disguises that we wear. What you want is a glimpse behind it. And that glimpse behind it is, to me, is seeing the God in them. Because these emotions are insubstantial, convincing for only a moment. So when it comes to Dad, the evil that you saw, the manipulation, yes, but what else is there behind that? Is there anything behind that? It's not a trick question. I'm just asking you from your experience.
His need to control.
So that's what you see behind that, his need to control.
His need to control, so there's something he's afraid of.
Yeah. So this is endless layers. If you think about an onion, that's one layer you pulled back. His manipulation, okay, under that, need to control. What would you say is behind that? The fear that you said?
Fear of something. Fear of something.
Yet we are so intimidated by other people's emotions and so convinced by our own that we lose sight of the underlying reality. By praying to whatever deity or higher self you believe in, you are essentially making a connection with reality, asking to be reminded that illusion isn't real. That makes sense?
Okay, yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. And see, here on salvation, page 29, under salvation, when you can step outside of your own suffering, you are saved. In spiritual terms, salvation is the same as being rescued physically. Physical danger puts us in a state of chaos, hurt, fear of danger, and panic. All these conditions are reflected in your mind. You resort to images of disaster whenever mental threats appear. Therefore, to be saved from suffering, you must find a place that is neither physical nor mental. Jesus calls this place the kingdom of God, or the soul. The label is less important than finding experience. Step by step, each person must locate an inner state that is free from images of pain. In that state lies redemption. I highlighted the step by step. Each person must locate an inner state that is free from images of pain.
In that state lies redemption. What stood out to you about that?
There's gotta be, I remember through my ugly turmoil in the marriage, there were times, very few times, where I would be at peace and the pain wasn't there. You know, the pain, you could say, was like pushed down, or I don't know, it just wasn't there. But I didn't feel safe.
You still
with
didn't feel
that.
safe.
I didn't feel safe because I thought, if I let myself stay in that,
In the peace?
in the peace, it was only going to let me go back into the marriage and think of him as not the evil person I was thinking of.
Well, you would lie to yourself.
Yeah. And that I would just put myself back in the same pattern that I was in the marriage, and then come back to the same turmoil I was in.
Where did you find the peace? When would that peace come?
I think it would come when I managed not to think about everything that was going on. So that was very few.
How
instances. I don't know.
you don't remember what you were doing? Were you cooking, or were you working on the yard, or for a walk?
Maybe I was on a drive listening to music, and then someone would call me. Someone would call me and ask me how things were going. And
While driving?
while driving, and it would just stir everything up.
I was listening to my music.
It would stir everything up, and then the anger would skyrocket. So I felt like there was no getting around it.
Well, then that's why I tell you guys, you don't have to answer your phone every time someone
Yeah.
I didn't tell you then. I tell you
Yeah.
that now, though. I was like, you don't protect your peace. If you're feeling good, don't answer.
That is the thing that I never had in mind. Protect your peace.
Protecting that you found it and you have to protect it. Like, no, someone's calling. I have to answer. I have to go.
Yeah, that is something that I wasn't aware of.
Or like when you're watching a movie. That's why I would get so frustrated, and sometimes do. But like when you're watching a movie and you pause the movie, you'd answer your call, and then you'll talk for 30 minutes, and then you'll finish the movie. Someone else calls, you pause. I was like, protect your peace, enjoy the damn movie. If you like this movie, why are you letting someone get in the way of it?
Well, the other day I did that.
Good.
The other day I
Good.
did that. I was proud of myself for doing that. I didn't answer the phone, and even though I can pause, we have that control to pause and restart.
That's why my phone's on Do Not Disturb.
Yeah.
All the time. Well, and that's why I try reminding you too, because sometimes you get upset. Like, well, I texted you 2 days ago and you haven't responded. I texted Crystal earlier this morning. She hasn't responded yet. I was like, let's give it time. And we'll get to it. And that's because you are so used to putting others first. Like, no, I'll respond to it immediately if someone texts me. Why can't you do it? It's like, 'cause we're trying our best to protect our peace.
And no, I'm doing that more and more.
Good.
So anyway, I'm learning about protecting my peace.
Do you find that peace now these days? Where's how are like your pockets of peace now compared to before?
It's working. It's working its way, you can say.
Trending up.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Consciousness. What is consciousness?
That is the question that's haunted humans since beginning of time. What is consciousness? Where's that come? Are you just asking that, or are you talking about for a part of the book?
Both.
See, I got to use the book, and this was underlined already. Jesus intended to
What
save the
page?
world.
What page?
10. Jesus intended to save the world by showing others the path to God consciousness.
And I have those in parentheses.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, this is underlined already. So, what is consciousness? That's the question.
Because then there's Christ consciousness and then God
That's
consciousness.
the same. It's the same thing. He doesn't say Christ consciousness in here. It's God consciousness. But when I say Christ consciousness, I'm talking about God consciousness. Those are the same thing. So, third Jesus, God consciousness, Christ consciousness, they're all the same thing.
Okay. And then on page 9, the two versions of Jesus, the bottom, the sketchy historical figure and the abstract theological creation. They hold a tragic aspect for me because I blame them for stealing something precious. The Jesus who taught his followers how to reach God consciousness. I want to offer the possibility that Jesus was truly, as he proclaimed, a Savior. Not the Savior, not the one and only Son of God. Rather, Jesus embodied the highest level of enlightenment.
He spent his brief adult life describing it, teaching it, and passing it on to new generations. Jesus intended to save the world by showing others the path to God consciousness.
So God consciousness is like just knowing what he's about.
Yeah, when I talk about Christ consciousness and people ask me what it is, because this came up like in dating. I'd be dating recently, or someone's religious or they're not. And there's one girl who we had a couple phone calls. She was about Jesus, but she wasn't so much about religion, but she loved Jesus and she found a church that she likes going to. And I was like, I was like, I love Jesus. Jesus is incredible, but he's not my savior. And I was like, I'll pray to Jesus. Still, I've had Jesus visit me in visions, but he is not my savior. I think Jesus was just trying to teach us about how to live one with God. And so Christ consciousness is the energetic embodiment of everything living like Christ should be.
Living like Christ should.
Living like Christ does. Yeah. Like, it's literally, what would Jesus do? That's Christ consciousness. Not what would Christianity do. Not what does the church tell you to do. Not what does the pastor tell you to do. Not what does the lady at the end of the pew tell you to do. What would Jesus do?
Oh, okay.
And Jesus would sit and break bread with anyone and everyone, any time of day.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jesus would not ridicule someone for being gay. He would not ridicule a trans person. He would love those people.
He loves anyone that is rejected. Anyone, period.
And Christ consciousness became louder and louder and louder to me the more I was in prison. The more I unlocked this incredible love for everyone, and like truly seeing the heart of all of them, not even caring what their crimes were, not even thinking about it. It was like I found this profound love. And I was like, oh, this is, and I hate to say it because like in Christian, like it'd be blasphemy to a devout Christian, but to be like, I feel like Jesus. Right? Even you, your eyes just went, what the hell are you talking about? But I felt godlike in the love I felt in that room for them. I was like, this is love. This is what Christ was talking about.
Wow, David. I like that.
Yeah.
Yesterday during the day, I was thinking, I should tell Sandra to come prepared to have dinner with me. To have dinner here when she comes to pick up the kids. And I didn't, but I called her to see how far she was, because I knew she had already left. And she said, hey, do you have any of that sopita left? Because on Friday I made sopita for you. I told them I would have that ready for her, for the kids, and they did. They did eat that. They were happy. And then it made me realize that, okay, I had these things ready for the kids, and I was thinking about getting something ready for her, just like I think about getting things ready for you and for Eric and Crystal. And I thought, Sandra doesn't have a mom to do that for her. And it just, I just had that feeling like I can do that for her. And this, when she told me about that she wanted sopita, le dije, no, that sopita's gone. We finished it that evening. And I said, but I'll make some for you. And so vino, and ya estaba lista la sopa, and I said, you want some enchiladas too? I can just picture her mom doing that for her. And it made me pushed away anything negative that I would feel. So I can see how you say you feel about those prisoners that you, and I felt love for her. And I've been buying things for her that I never did before. And then it does make me wonder, what's wrong with Letty? What is she doing? You know?
Oh, if she's thinking that?
Yeah, if she's suspicious about what, she what is she thinking? What's her agenda? But that's just love.
That's exactly what it is. That's exactly what it is.
Without, just doing something good without judgment.
Without judgment and noticing the human. You saw the little girl who lost her mom. Yeah. You're like, nothing else matters.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. That's someone who deserves love that they're not getting anymore. Well, just not in flesh.
Not from her mother.
Not in flesh.
Not in the flesh. And it felt good to do that for her. And here I'm thinking, I still have my mom. I like how she makes eggs, and the other day I asked her to make one for me. And here, Sandra can't do that. Sandra can't do that, I think. If it's in my power to do, I need to do it.
Well, and I think that was a mutual desire for both of you. Like, she's like, hey, actually, I want some. And she stayed and ate.
Yeah.
So I think that was like a mutually beneficial thing.
And she told me Eric had already had food for her.
She's like, I don't care, I want.
Yeah, so that was...
Some motherly time.
Yeah.
You're still a mother figure to her. Been in her life a long time.
I want to be.
Yeah. I think as long as you hold that intention and energy. Yeah. She probably felt it. Maybe you were feeling it. And or I don't know. There's something under the current there going on.
Yeah.
That's it. That's it. Now you just gotta find that same reason to love someone and everyone. And you realize that, and you see that the manifestation of what you're seeing, the representation of who that person is and the actions that they're doing in the moment isn't who they are. It's the disguise. It's the disguise behind who they really are.
I need to highlight that.
Well, it was the part we started.
Yeah.
Yeah, we just went full circle. Let's read it again. Prayer. And we haven't prayed. This is just talking. But in prayer, you can still ask if there's someone in your life who you can't see that for. You can ask, like, show me the humanity of this person. Ask to see what lies behind evil. This doesn't have to be a philosophical request. We just did the philosophical kind of dive, but it doesn't have to be that. What you want is a glimpse behind the disguises we all wear when we feel angry, victimized, hostile, and aggressive. These emotions are insubstantial, convincing for only a moment. Yet we are so intimidated by other people's emotions and so convinced by our own that we lose sight of the underlying reality. By the underlying reality of the God behind the evil, the God behind the mistakes. By praying to whatever deity or higher self you believe in, you are essentially making a connection with reality, asking to be reminded that illusion isn't real. That illusion of everything you dislike about that person isn't real.
Isn't real. That's just a disguise.
It's the disguise. And that's why people think I'm crazy when I talk about loving everyone on social media.
You get those comments?
I think I've had friends say it's like toxic positivity, or I've had friends saying like, challenge me and like you're really saying you would love someone. You're telling me if someone murdered your family that you would love them. You would love that person. And I was like, I've never been in that position, so I can't say. But I was like, probably not. Not at first. But I hope that I would be able to.
Some people do.
I was like, some people do. Some people have shown that it's possible. And I like to think that I'm doing the work necessary to be able to have that kind of grace. So that's God consciousness, I think. That's seeing that you're all God. You saw the God in Sandra.
I've never been able to think of it that way.
Well, it's the divine. It's the innocence. It's the purity. That's what the God is.
That innocence in everyone.
Just the pure light before everything we picked up. You know, like everything your dad did, that was all a disguise too. There's still something behind that. And with grandma, all of her grief and the way she's just weighed down by her sadness, that's all a disguise too.
It has to be the disguise is, or whatever it is she's feeling is part of all her illness.
Yeah, it's all, illness is what's in our body, is unfelt, anything unrecognized, anything unattended. It just stays stuck in our body and becomes an illness. The energy kills it.
Yeah.
The energy is killing us from inside out.
It would be so hard to explain this to her.
Yeah, to anyone who's been heavy in the indoctrination, because they taught, I'm sure in this book says it, but religion robs you of spirit. I had went to like a men's breakfast that a friend invited me to. It was at a church. I didn't think it was going to be super religious, but there was a breakfast and it was cool. And then after there was like a message and it did get preachy, but I hadn't been in like a sermon in a while. And I heard the guy, the speaker, he was so proud of the fact of like how much his mindset is focused on heaven. You know, like he would tell his daughter, like, what you're going through right now, this decision you're facing, is this kingdom minded or like earthly minded? If it's about earth, it doesn't matter. It's all about the kingdom of God when we go to heaven. And that's what I was telling you. I was like, the church robbed us of now. They're saying now doesn't matter. That this life doesn't matter. That what matters is where we're going after we die.
Yeah.
And that's the ultimate robbing from the present.
Yeah. It's true. It's like, okay, yeah, we're supposed to focus in the kingdom of heaven, but in the meantime, what do I do? How do I deal with this? How do I deal now with this?
Yeah. And the answer is you bring them to church. They're not saved. It's because they need Jesus. Yeah or no?
Yeah. So then, like you said, you pray to Jesus, but you don't feel like he's your savior.
No. I think and I say this with as much humility as possible, but I think he's like a peer. He's one of us.
Well, he is.
Yeah, he's one of us who just was very blessed, talented, and very smart, and he did the work. He was very humble. That was probably his soul's mission, to come and be who he was. But no, I think it's possible for us to attain what he did. I'm not saying I'm trying to do that. I think the more you live with love, the more you're living with that Christ consciousness. Because where it says like the evil, you don't see the evil. You either see the evil or you don't. And I don't see evil. I don't see evil anywhere. I see hurt people hurting people. You have anything else on your, any other pages you highlighted? Or?
All the previous steps serve one purpose: to blur the line between good and evil. In the beginning, these are stark opposites. We experience good through pleasure, peace, well-being, safety. We experience evil through pain, struggle, restriction, and fear. We naturally seek the one and run away from the other. What we don't see is that these natural tendencies belong to a state of awareness that has been conditioned over time. In other words, they are self-created. By gaining knowledge of the self, you also learn how to create new things in place of the old. As regards to evil, the new thing you must create is the absence of duality. No more dark versus light. No more fixed boundaries to divide safe from unsafe, God from Satan, self from non-self. Okay, that duality.
Yeah. You'll hear that in other videos we've watched where it says non-duality. It's the same thing as absence of duality.
Absence of
Duality is dual. It's two options.
two options.
Yes,
Yeah,
good or
like
bad.
good or bad.
Yes or no, good or evil, God or Satan, love or hate, rich, poor.
And see, in my mind, it's like everything is about that.
Yeah.
Right. In the doctrines that I received, it's everything is about that.
And society, too. That's been pushed by society. It's either liberal or Republican.
Yeah.
You either love someone or you hate them. You either support minorities or you're a racist. You either support this person or you're a Nazi.
Wow.
We're very much, and if you're not this, you're definitely that.
Wow.
And so no one's listening to each other. We're not so no more fixed boundaries to divide safe from unsafe, God from Satan, self from non-self. As these boundaries fade, nothing remains but one reality. As these boundaries fade, as you begin to see that the two are more of one, nothing remains but one reality, a boundless state known as God. This is God consciousness, knowing that everything is one. To the extent that you can dissolve your own fearful limitations, the fearful limitations is the duality.
Okay. Okay.
To the extent that you can dissolve your own fearful limitations, you get closer to God consciousness. And in the same process, you rob evil of its seeming reality. Dissolve your own fearful limitations. That is the duality part. This is only the briefest outline of how a person can move beyond evil. But I believe it is what Jesus meant when he said, "Resist not evil." Behind the appearance of craziness lies profound wisdom. Yet we only get a hint of that in the few words recorded by the Gospels. The full teachings needs to be unpacked from the suitcase, as it were, and laid out in detail.
Resist not evil.
Evil is the disguise.
My doctor. When I go to the doctor, I take this book so I can read while I'm waiting.
Mm-hmm.
But he asked me,
Yeah.
he says, "How do you write that book?" I go, "I just started reading it. I was on the first chapter." I go, "So," and he says, "Well, so far, what did you get from it?" And then the next time I went, I didn't have the book. And he remembered and he said, "Are you still reading that book?"
Well, that was for him then. He needed to see you read it.
Yeah.
Well, this book is old. I didn't realize how old it was until I started looking for videos online. Copyright 2008. Yeah.
Almost 20 years.
Yeah. Wow, that's crazy. Yeah. Does that make sense then at the end?
Yes.
So you have a better idea of what consciousness is?
Yeah. Yes. So thank you. I appreciate this. When it talks here about resist not evil,
That is duality.
that's duality. Because,
You're resisting evil. No, we're good.
but Jesus says, don't resist. To me,
Because you have to love.
to me, it didn't make sense.
That's consciousness. That means that the consciousness you were at was limited because you could not perceive a higher truth. There are many levels of consciousness. It's never ending. There's animal consciousness. Animals they only survive. They don't ruminate on things like we do. You know, when they feel flight or fight, flight or fight, they're only in that in the moment that they're running away. And then when they feel safe again, they're back to the present. You know, they're not stuck in their head where you're like, I got a freaking berry last week. Like, So that's animal consciousness. Right. And then it's been said in a documentary, I don't think it used these words, but it showed me that I put two and two together from something else I heard. But Earth has a war consciousness. Right. Like, imagine our souls before coming to Earth and living this life. It's like a video game. They're like, hey, where do you want to go to live a new human life, right? Or a new whatever life. You can go to this planet, they got this. You can go to this planet, they got this. You can go to Earth. Earth is the most beautiful of them all. But if you go, Earth does have war consciousness that you have to deal with. And, what's war consciousness? And how I believe it is like, it's war. Animals go to war.
Yeah.
Animals kill each other. The documentary showed me that mycelium, which is it's what grows mushrooms. I'm gonna be simplifying this way too much, but mycelium is like an underground network that is embedded in everything. We're surrounded by it, but mycelium has a consciousness, and what mycelium does is it's kind of monitoring everything that's growing out in a forest, a rainforest, right? And it realizes that there's some kind of plant who's growing to be very, very big. Mind you, this plant is growing with other competing plants, and they're all fighting for the sunlight. So plants are trying to kill each other so they can get all the sunlight. That's war consciousness, right? So this plant is getting overpowering, it's getting too big, and mycelium has to check it. It's like, no, this plant's getting too much. So it sends an army of ants to go start destroying the plant, right? So then the plant's like, oh, we're getting destroyed by ants. We have to give it a toxin. So it takes some time, but while the ants are tearing it apart, it develops a toxin that comes out of the plants when the ants eat it. So the ants are then like, hey, they have a defense. We have to move to another plant. And it goes to that plant and that plant defense. It goes, but I think that's like kind of where the God consciousness is too, because when that happens, the ants survive, and the ants get to sustain and thrive, but everyone takes a small hit. All the different plants are taking small, like this, they're offering the tithe. It's their 10%.
It's their 10%. Okay.
So when I realized that, I was like, oh, part of the deal on being here is that we're always going to see a good versus evil. And humans, we are the highest consciousness of any living entity because we can interact with nature, with God. We can see that we are also God, right? We're aware of ourselves. We're not just eating, praying, hunting. Like, we are aware of ourselves. We're aware of the things we say. We're aware of the things we said 10 years ago that are still haunting us. Right?
Yeah.
So that is just a basic human consciousness. You're aware of yourself. And then but then you still have other consciousness to go. Then you get to God consciousness.
Consciousness is being aware.
I think it's levels of being aware.
Levels of being aware.
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, it's being aware. I'm not the expert though.
I'm on page 30.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, but right here where it says, this is only the briefest outline of how a person can move beyond evil. The full teachings need to be unpacked from the suitcase, as it were, and laid out in detail. And I think that's the work I'm doing. I'm helping people unpack the suitcase.
I like how you're so aware of yourself. Of your work.
Oh.
Of your work, of yourself, of what you're doing. I'm very proud of you.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's put together the bed frame
Okay.
and then get the pedicure.
You still want to do the pedicure?
If there's time. Yeah. All right, y'all. One big takeaway I want to share is that grief doesn't always look like grief. In fact, I'd argue that these days, 99% of the time, grief never looks like grief. But at the same time, it always looks like grief because grief is everything that we can feel. But if we're not acknowledging it, then it's kind of like we remove the dignity of grief. So it is everything and it's not everything, if that makes sense. Sometimes it hides inside heartbreak. Sometimes it sounds like silence. Sometimes it shows up as being even more religious. And love, well, love wears disguises too. And my mom and I spent this conversation peeling those layers back. Without guilt, beyond the judgment, behind the old beliefs we no longer wanted, or that we no longer wanted to carry. So as we close, I'm reminded that wisdom often arrives in the simplest places or phrases, even as simple as protect your peace. In a world that constantly demands our attention, that asks us to respond immediately, to engage constantly, and perhaps the most radical act is to create a sanctuary for yourself, a place where presence can flourish without interruption. And healing doesn't only live in therapy sessions. It lives in how we give while we're still here. It lives inside a dresser, a bowl of soup, a clean slate, a second chance. What would change if you could see beyond the disguises others wear to the divinity that lives within them? What might you notice if you looked at someone in your life, perhaps someone difficult, maybe someone difficult, especially someone difficult, and asked, what lies behind this disguise? This anger I'm receiving, this resentment I'm receiving, this unworthiness I'm seeing in this person, what lies behind that? What divine spark is trying to be seen? If even you found a moment of peace, whether in this episode, whether out on your walk, whether you're out cooking or driving, whatever it is, I hope you protect it. It's sacred, and you deserve your peace. And if you're still waiting for permission to love fully, to grieve honestly, to speak what's been sitting in your throat for too long, consider this your sign. You're allowed to begin. You are allowed to express. You're allowed to express emotions. You're allowed to express words. You're allowed to express anger. Honor what is in your heart. This is the apprenticeship of the unknown. All of these feelings become the unknown when we decide to walk in them. When we allow them to walk through us, we become in the unknown. We become living in the unknown. Learning to see what's really there, not what we've been conditioned to believe has to be there. I want to close this with a short poem that I found while editing this podcast. I feel like I found love, but I feel all alone. There's no one else here. Only I scream these thoughts. Only I crease this box. I am unfolding, but feel left out. I am empty and ready to be filled. I've even found grace for souls who have killed. So I'm beginning to think if maybe love is a skill. You're perfect. Everything about you is perfect. Thank you.